Hi, my name is Ram, and in this video we'll learn about two ways to handle form data in React application. The goal of this episode is to create simple form, gather data, and console.log it. Pretty easy. Here we are in newly created React application. Let's open app.js component, and there let's add gameForm to render method. Now we need to import it from gameForm, and of course let's create new file named gameform.js, and there let's create new React component. We call it gameForm, and it renders empty form tag. The form itself is going to be very simple, just two fields, title of the game and checkbox to point out if I own it or not. So first we define text input field with placeholder title, and let's add another one with type checkbox. And let's wrap it into label tag and add description to it, own it ? And the last touch, button with submit type, and label it save. So go to the browser and see this beauty we created. Aren't we awesome? As you may have guessed from the title of this video, there are two ways you can get data from your form: via refs using uncontrolled elements, or via state using controlled elements. Let's start with uncontrolled one. Uncontrolled element in React is element without set value and without onChange event. In other words, React doesn't control this element. So what we define here right now is two uncontrolled input elements. If we'd like to specify some initial value to the field, we need to use default value prop instead of value1, because that will make this element controlled. So let's try it out. Let's add value and set it to title string. Now in the browser in console, we see warning that tells us that we used value without onChange handler, and that makes this element read-only. Okay, so let's remove this line and continue. This approach with refs is the easiest one to grasp for those of us who come from jQuery, for example. What would we do if we used something like jQuery? Well, first we define onSubmit event to catch user submitting the form. And now let's define this function. We define it as class property handle submit equals to function that takes event. This is another way to bind context without explicitly binding it. We're using modern JavaScript to the fullest here. So let's call prevent default to cancel standard form submission, and now we'd like to get all data from the form. For that, in jQuery, we'd either find form and serialize its data, or we'd find each element and get its data like this. We find title element and get its value. Ref's approach is quite similar to this. We define ref function on each element and save reference to it in instance variable. Let me show you how it's done. Let's go to our title field and add ref attribute. It equals to function that takes input itself, and then we save this reference to title variable. Let's do the same thing with checkbox, just change variable name to own. And now in handle submit function, we console.log object with title that equals to this title value. As you can see, we do almost the same thing as we would do with jQuery. We get element by reference and then got value from it. Second field is own, and it equals to this own checked value. Now if we go to browser and submit form, you can see that it works. Let's type something in text input and check the checkbox, submit it, and it works. We got our data, now we can validate it, submit it to server, etc. Cool, let's try another approach with form state and controlled elements. Controlled element has onChange event handler in it, which saves data into component state, and value is also set. So let's delete ref line and instead specify value to equal this state title, and onChange to be handled by handle title change function. Let's define handler, handle title change. In it we set state title to equal target's value. Now we need to initialize state for this component. There are two ways to do that. The first one is what we did before. We define constructor, it takes props, then we run superprops, and after that we initialize state. Or we can use modern JavaScript power and just define state as class property, like this: state equals object title is an empty string. So now in handle submit we just console.log this.state. Now if we go to browser, change title and submit, we see changes. What happens is, every time user changes input value, this onChange event is fired and title field in state is updated. So let's add the same thing to checkbox. So here we add checked prop to equal this.state.own, and we add onChange to equal to this handle own change. And let's add this own field to state and set it to false by default. And let's define this handle own change function that sets own field to e.target.checked. And that's it. If we go to browser, we have the same effect. We change title, check the checkbox, submit form, and here we go. All data is available to us. With this approach, we have much more power and flexibility. And personally, for me, it feels better. But that's not an argument. Try out both approaches and see for yourself. As a general advice though, Ref's approach is good for very simple forms with 1 or 2 fields and when all you do with this form is submit it. But if you need to have more behavior on your form like instant validations or conditional hiding and showing of form elements depending on other elements' content, etc., then using state and controlled elements is the way to go. And the last thing, a little trick I use in my forms all the time. So let's say we need to add another input field tagline, and for that we need to do 3 things. We need to add new field to state, tagline equals to empty string. We need to add element itself, so we just copy it and we change placeholder to tagline and value to tagline and onChange to handle tagline change. And then we need to define handler that looks almost identical to the one we already created for title field. We just need to rename it to tagline. So let's unify this handler for common cases. Let's rename it to handle change, and inside it, we'll use target's name to store state's field name. For that, we need to add name prop to both input elements. So here in title, we add name title, and we change onChange handler to handle change, and the same thing we do with tagline, name tagline, and changing the onChange event handler. Also, let's remove handle tagline change because we do not need it anymore. This way, we don't need to create a lot of almost identical handlers, but on the other hand, you'll need to always specify a name for your elements. And that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends and colleagues. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section in associated blog post. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.